Well, good morning, everyone. It's delightful to see your faces, and I'm very excited for the next 90 minutes that we've got scheduled with Chef Linda Carucci. Today is going to be a healthy and delicious start to the new year, an online cooking demonstration. This is an Ollie first, though in Linda's hands, you will have quite a veteran of cooking instruction. And let me say a few words about Linda. Please look at the document that we sent all those who are registered for today. In that document will be a more expansive introduction to Linda. But the highlights are, we're talking about somebody who has tremendous experience, both in cookbooks as well as being a former dean of the California Culinary Academy and many other forms of instruction. So it's going to be really a delightful hour. In order to make this hour be hour and 15 minutes, 20 minutes, be as dynamic as possible, I'm going to ask Leigh Charles to talk a little bit about today's technology, just so that you will know yourselves how to navigate it. So, Leigh Charles, over to you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Susan. Really quick, this is going to be an added tech thing that we can work with, and it's going to be fun. So you'll be able to experience this class the best way possible. What I would like everyone to do is to notice that Linda Carucci has two screens. There's an overhead screen of what's being cooked, and there's also a screen of her main screen. So what I would like you to do is hover your cursor over the main screen first, and in the top right corner, there are three dots, and you want to click on those three dots, and there is going to be something that says pin. I would like you to click on pin. That will solidify the camera, that camera, for your screen and viewing. I'll give you a chance to do that. And then right after you do that, and you see it on the screen, there'll be another camera that says Linda Carucci, that is the overhead view. I'm hoping everyone can see that.
There's an onion in it right now.
Yes. On that one, do the exact same thing. Go into the top right corner of that screen, hover over the three blue dots, click on that and pin that, and it'll say add pin. So click add pin, and then you should have the cameras side by side. Like the views should be side by side rather than anybody else. You don't want to look at me during this. We want to get the right cameras. It looks like some of you are able to do that. I can't tell because I can't look at everyone's screen, but that's how you would get both screens to be the main screen for you. Once again, I'll go over it really quickly. Top right corner of Linda Carucci main, go to the top right corner, click the three dots, click pin, that camera will stay. Then find Linda Carucci, this is just the name by itself, which is the overhead camera. It might be further along in our screen, but do the exact same thing. Go to the top right corner, blue box with three white dots, click on that, add pin, and hopefully they'll both be right next to each other. Okay, all right, so now for your enjoyment, Chef Linda Carucci.
Wow, Leigh Charles, we are in good hands with you. Thank you. And Susan, thank you for the lovely introduction. It's really, really an honor and a privilege to be with you here today. I'm in my kitchen in Montclair in the Oakland Hills, and I used to teach cooking classes here for people live. I used to do Saturday night dinners with a little class where 13 people would sit around the counter here, and I would cook paella or a timpano from the movie Big Night. Remember that one? And then we'd all sit in the dining room just across the way here and sit around the table and talk about the food and the movie and whatever else was going on in the neighborhood. And I really loved doing that. And then I got a call from this place called Copia in Napa Valley to go up there and work. And I said, no, I won't, don't want to make that commute, but ended up going up there, falling in love with the place. And I worked there for a couple of years. And before that, I might have actually met some of you, because when Sur La Table first opened in Berkeley on 4th Street, my friend was the manager, and they wanted to get customers into the store. So she hired me to do cooking demonstrations every Friday afternoon. I guess it was like Friday late morning. And I would take a piece of equipment that they were trying to promote, and I would develop a recipe like the tarte tatin pan. I made tarte tatin. I showed them how to make quick puff pastry. We peeled the apples using the apple peeler device. And then I would cut it up and serve it, and people would come in, and it was free, and it was really, really fun. And then they asked me to do another series, a basics of cooking series, and I taught that there. And I see, Diane, just you can leave that for a minute.
Okay.
Right now, you're seeing on your screen, I suspect, a poll about poached eggs, and that's going to give all of us some information about one of the recipes that I'm going to demonstrate today, and your familiarity or lack thereof with making poached eggs. So please take a moment as I'm talking now to fill out that poll. Just if you have any questions about responding, then you can raise your hand virtually at any time now or during the course of this demo by there's a in the participants box. You can click on that, and there's a blue button, and that's how you raise your hand virtually. And then either Leigh Charles or Rob, our tech crew today, will notice that you have a question, and then you can unmute yourself and then ask the question. I think that's pretty sufficient. But also, we should tell you that you're all, according to plan anyway, everyone is muted right now. And so if you do want to ask a question after you raise your hand virtually and you're recognized by Rob or Leigh Charles, then you'll have to unmute yourself by clicking on the microphone button that says mute or unmute, and then you can speak. And then as soon as you ask the question, it would be great if you clicked on mute again. Okay. Are we finished with the results of the poll? What do you think, Leigh Charles?
77%.
We have
77% have voted.
77% of the people have completed the poll. So please continue to work on the poll. It's 4 quick responses to, or 4 quick options to the question, what's your experience with poaching eggs? And so I'm going to just keep talking a little bit in terms of an introduction here. I am new to Ollie, much newer than many of you, I'm sure, because I've been a member for just a year. And my first class that I have ever taken with Ollie was with Joe Lurie out in Lafayette at the community center there. I think the title was The Immigrant Experience Through Film. And I remember sitting there in the second row. I was just totally mesmerized by the concept in terms of what was going on in our country a year ago. And also in terms of, just being a lover of films. And Joe just, drew me right in with his intro at Freight and Salvage. And I actually changed my course preference and signed up for that class. And I remember on the first day, he said, we're going to have the filmmakers Zoom in after we see the film. They're going to Zoom in and talk to us. And I thought, as many of you probably did back then a year ago, I thought he meant they were going to drive fast to Lafayette so that we could talk to them. I had no idea that Zoom was a thing besides getting in your car and driving fast. So here we are today. I've taught several Zoom classes over the course of the summer. I started in about June. And when it was very clear that I wasn't going to be able to go up to Ramekins in Sonoma, where I used to teach once or twice a month for the past 20 years, or Draeger's on the peninsula, where I used to teach once a month for the last 20 years or so. It seemed like it would still be fun to teach cooking. And I started experimenting with this particular model in my home kitchen. And now our friend Diane is here working the camera, and my husband Al has rigged up a device in the hood of our stove for an overhead view using his iPhone, an overhead view of, in this case, the wok with the onion in it. I'm going to take the onion out because that's not part of the plan. And so here we are today. So go ahead, Diane, can you
So you
tell
want the
us, or
results?
can tell us,
Yeah.
Leigh Charles, can you tell us the results of the poll?
Let's see here. So I've made a poached egg and was satisfied with it, 13%. Or no, 19%. I've made a poached egg but was not completely satisfied with the results, 41%, which is the highest. I've never made a poached egg and I'm curious about how to do it successfully, 30%. Regardless of my experience making a poached egg, I don't eat them and I don't see myself making one, 10%.
Okay, well, for that last 10%, thank you very much, everybody. That really helps me. For that last 10%, I think you might enjoy the hash. Some of you may be vegetarians or vegans, and that's why you're not interested in poaching eggs. And there is a vegetarian or vegan alternative to the hash that we're going to make. And certainly, I do believe that the bread has buttermilk, so that could be an issue for you. But anyway, we're going to have fun in the next hour and 15 minutes or so. And I hope that you've all had a chance to print out the recipes. The first one that I'm going to start with is the hash, the Brussels sprouts and sweet potato hash. And Diane, can you just fix the screen there so that I can see what's going on? Okay, so I'm starting with the sweet potato. You can use a jewel sweet potato, a red garnet, a Diane. Were they naming that for you?
Absolutely.
But what you want is the sweet potato with the orange flesh, because that has, to my taste, the most flavor and the best texture for this application. There's another Japanese sweet potato, and there's a yam that's also has the same quality. The flesh of those, the latter that I just mentioned, that flesh is really dry. It's more yellow in color than orange. And so here's what we're going to do. We're just going to peel this sweet potato. I'm using, this is a Kuhn Rikon. They call it a U peeler because of the shape. And the nice thing about this peeler is that, by the way, I don't work for any of these companies whose products I'm going to tell you about. But the cool thing about this peeler is that you can reverse the blade. So if you have a righty and a lefty in the house, you can either buy two different peelers, but you can reorient the blade so that it works for each, I was going to say predilection, but I don't think that's politically correct, for lefties and righties. Let's just leave it at that. So I'm peeling this onto a paper towel, and I'm going to fold it up in a minute. There we go. That looks nice and clean. And now I have the cutting board nice and clean to cut the sweet potato. We're going to cut this into about 1/2-inch dice. And the way you do that is to make planks and then cut the planks into what look like long French fries. And I'll show you how to do that. I'm using a Granton edge knife. You can probably see, I'm trying to tip it so that the light is reflecting this. These are little dimples that are in each side of the blade. And those little dimples are really wonderful when you have a vegetable like this or a piece of meat, where when you cut it, it would stick to the knife and then you'd have to unstick it and go on and cut the next piece. So what happens here is these little dimples let a little air in each time you put the knife into the piece of food. And that air allows the piece of food to come off the knife. You'll see. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is find what is the most solid place on the potato where it's going to be really sturdy. And so I'm going to cut the first cut about 1/2 inch in, and I plant the knife in, then I hold the tip of the blade, and then like a guillotine, I just make a cut. And then I'm going to hold the potato between my non-dominant thumb and fork and index finger and make another cut. And so I have 3 planks here. And so let me gather these together. I think I can do 2 at once. I don't want to have a round surface on the flat board because that's not stable. It's easier to make a mistake that way. So I line those up, and again, the same thing. There we go. And we'll do that with this one. And now I'm going to just square these off. So this end that's closer to the knife is right up against the blade. I'll cut these into about 1/2-inch pieces. Now, the culinary police are not coming around with a yardstick these days, so if they're a little bit bigger, that's okay. But in this case, I see one piece at the end that's really dense. Well, that's okay. If it were really, really dense and bigger than 1/2 inch, then I would cut that like I will this one. Just bring that out. I have a bench scraper here. I couldn't cook without one. I use it all the time. And I'm putting the sweet potatoes into a microwave safe bowl. Now for that, I use a 2-quart or 8-cup Pyrex liquid measure. And I like it for the microwave because it has a handle that I can grab. The handle stays relatively cool. And so I have the potatoes in here. Now I'm going to add some onions. And this is a yellow onion. I'm going to cut off both the stem end and the root end. And if your onion, sometimes it's hard to buy an onion that's not huge. If you can only find a huge onion, then just use half of it. And you still, if you're going to use half, you still want to do this. And I promise I'm not throwing these things on the floor. I do have a bus tub here. And now I'm going to find the place where the concentric circles meet in the middle. And I'm going to cut the onion across that so that I have the best chance of even cuts when I'm going around. I'll show you what I mean by that. And I'm going to peel off the outside layer. If I find that sometimes I try to keep one more layer closer to the skin on the onion and then half of it is papery. So now I'm just in the habit of taking off the whole thing. Of course, when I make chicken stock, I leave the skins on the onions. They give a nice brown color to the stock. And I can get rid of this. This is the time when you want to take any last bit of papery skin off the board so that you don't get it mixed in with the food that you're cooking. Okay, clean board, clean knife. And now I'm going to cut what's called lyonnaise, named after the French culinary capital of Lyon. And this is, there's a dish called pomme lyonnaise, potatoes with onions, where things are cut like this. Now see, it's falling apart. That's okay. We're just going to make sure that everything is about the same width. And we're going for a 1/2 inch at the widest part. So this is about a 1/2 inch right here, this widest part of the onion. All right, there's 1/2 into the same microwave safe vessel. And now we'll do the other half. So if you had a huge onion, you would be happy to just use that 1/2. But since ours is pretty regular sized, we'll do both halves. Okay. Next thing I'm going to do is put some olive oil in here. And I don't know that I was that specific in the recipe, but it's really nice to be able to coat, or it's nice if you can put the olive oil in first and then turn it around, toss it around, coat all the vegetables before you add the dry spices. So we have olive oil, we'll stir them around, and you'll know when they're coated when the sweet potatoes start glistening. If they're not evenly glistening, then you have to just keep stirring. Okay, that looks good. And now we'll add some garlic powder. I like to use a garlic powder here because it really permeates. The flavor of the garlic really permeates. And since, and this is salt, fine sea salt. Since we're going to ultimately, after we microwave these, to cook them partially, we're going to put them in the hot wok. If we had we don't have a lot of oil in here. So if we had raw garlic, it could burn. And there's nothing worse to me, this Italian-American cook, than the smell and flavor of rather burned garlic. So garlic powder gives you the flavor of garlic, that sweet garlic flavor. It adds a dimension of complexity without risking that flavor of either raw or, in this case, burned garlic. Okay, now what we'll do is take these over to the microwave, and I'm going to set the timer for 3 minutes, and we'll see what happens. Of course, if your microwave has a different power strength than mine, then you're going to need a little more time. And I've been making these a lot lately. And what I've found is that it's not always 3 minutes. It's been taking a little longer. So maybe I've been more generous with the cut size, I don't know. But I have a paring knife here. I'm going to spear one of the potatoes just to see how it's doing. But in the meantime, I know I said in the recipe that you would be on step 4 with the Brussels sprouts. But if you'll stick with me for a minute and jump ahead to step 6, we're going to go to the Brussels sprouts later. All right, here I have some bacon. This has been cut into what are called lardons in the French culinary vernacular. And lardons are about matchstick-sized pieces of bacon. So you take your 3 strips of bacon on a cutting board and you cut them crosswise into at half-inch intervals, and you end up with these matchstick-type shaped pieces. And in restaurant kitchens, these delis, we just call them delis, deli containers are a great way to store vegetables, which I encourage you to do, or prepped, any prepped ingredient. You can just put the lid on it, stack them in the fridge, and they go in the dishwasher. So that's the bacon. And now, so I am making this with the bacon today, obviously, but if you didn't want to use bacon, I assure you this is just as delicious, or it's delicious in a different way with just mushrooms. So this is 5 ounces, 5, I would say medium-sized cremini mushrooms. You can throw 6 in if you're not sure. I mean, it doesn't really matter that much. And I slice them, I would say about 1/3 of an inch thick. And I'm going to put those on top. So if you were just using the mushrooms, you would put those in the wok, excuse me. And I'll drizzle those. Now the wok is cold. That's really important at this point. Drizzling them with 1 of the tablespoons of olive oil. So 1 of the tablespoons of olive oil went into the sweet potatoes. The other is going in here. And then I'll turn this on high. There we go. And I'm going to put the lid on and set a timer for 2 minutes. And now I'll work with the Brussels sprouts. So what's happening here is that the bacon is rendering its fat, and it's going to melt nice and evenly because we started in the cold wok. If we started in the hot wok, the edges of the bacon, or the external fat, would melt faster and therefore start to cook faster and therefore possibly burn before the center pieces of fat had rendered completely. So this way, you're going to get nice, succulent pieces of bacon in here if you're using bacon. Okay, Brussels sprouts. I have about 8 ounces of Brussels sprouts, and I've been buying them on the stalk. You know, I have to tell you, I've been saying I go to the store, but I haven't been to the grocery store since March 12th, I think. So my husband, Al, is doing all the shopping. He's been really terrific at learning how to roam the produce markets at the Berkeley Bowl. He also goes to Trader Joe's. So he goes to each place about once a week. And the stocks, unfortunately, have not been available recently. So we are using Brussels sprouts that came, there was about 1 pound in a bag. I don't know whether Al put them in the bag or whether they came in the bag, but I'm using organic. So I cut them with a knife because I know in the recipe it says use the food processor with the slicing blade. And when I'm making this dish for Thanksgiving, this part of the dish with the Brussels sprouts, I do go to the trouble to dig out the slicing blade and set it up in the Cuisinart. And, you know, cleaning that thing is a little bit of a bear because you have to get in there with a toothpick. And so I finally realized that by the time I even locate the blade in my pantry, and set it up, I could whip through these with a chef knife. So that's what I'm going to do. I have 3 left that I haven't already cut. So I'm going to stand this up on its end and then cut, it's 3 or 4 pieces lengthwise. And there's a timer. So I have 2 timers that just went off. By the way, I hope you know you have come to a 3-ring circus today. We've got a lot of stuff going on. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to do the virtual hand raise in participants, and then we'll be glad to respond. But first thing I want to do is look in at this. The bacon is starting to render. And the nice thing is that you don't have to separate those pieces of bacon that are stuck together after you cut them. But because the heat will do that for you. So I'm going to go for another 2 minutes on this. Start. And then I also heard the sweet potatoes are calling to us. And so I want to check them and see if the biggest sweet potato piece is done. If so, I'll know that the little pieces are done because obviously if the big one is done, the little ones are done. But if you test a little one, you still don't know if the big ones are done. So aim for the biggest one you can find. This looks pretty big. I could tell just by stirring it, by the sound that the potato piece made when it hit the glass bowl. That's the sound of it's not done. It's still hard. But just for the sake of discussion, yeah, this would come off right away if it were done. So I'm going to go back in for another 90 seconds. And usually that does the trick. The onions are turning nice and translucent, which is exactly what we want. And I have one of these plastic lid covers. I think that's redundant. Okay, so let's get back to the Brussels sprouts. We have 2 more to cut. So again, I trimmed the bottoms off these because they were a little brown. And if you see any discoloration on the outside leaves, get rid of those. It looks like, do we have somebody in the chat room there, Rob?
No.
Or no? Okay, good. All right.
Well, there was a couple questions.
Good. Go ahead.
One question was from Peggy. What brand of garlic powder do you prefer?
I love the Trader Joe's garlic powder because it is a really nice grain. Some garlic powders are so powdery that they become airborne, it seems, as soon as you open up the lid or you shake them out. They're just like dust. So I really like the size of the grains of the Trader Joe's garlic powder. Thanks. I appreciate the question. What else?
And there was another question. Can the recipe from Ronnie? Can the recipes be successful if portions are halved? And is there a substitution for the chili flakes?
Oh, yes. You could definitely have this. And but I have to tell you that it lasts for several days in the fridge if you have leftovers. And it's really nice some mornings when you wake up and you want to have some, good hearty breakfast. It's really nice to be able to have some of these left over. You'll see what the quantity is in the end because things cook down a lot. And the chili flakes. If you don't care for the spicy chili flavor, just omit them. Or you could use chili oil. You're going to see at the end when I garnish the poached eggs on the hash that I use a chili oil, and you could, better control the spice quotient if you're using something like that at the end as a garnish. But they're not necessary. They're not integral to the dish. Okay, so I've got these nice and sizzling, and you can see that the bacon and the mushrooms are both browning, and I'm going to spread them out. I'm still on high, by the way. I'm still on a high. The burner is still on high. And now I'll add the Brussels sprouts. And when you're adding something to a hot skillet or wok like this, you always want to add away from you so it doesn't splash onto you. And then I'll add the rest of the salt and some pepper and the chili flakes. And I'm just gonna put the lid on that and let it cook for a couple of minutes until the Brussels sprouts soften. I just want them to soften a little bit. And let me check on the sweet potatoes and see where we stand here. Oh, they look good. I can tell just by the color. And, you know, one of the things in cooking school that they teach you is to use all of your senses to observe what's going on. And so I can smell the onions. I can see the bright orange, the transformation of color in the sweet potatoes, and the sound. Yeah, it's a totally different sound now when the sweet potato pieces hit the side of the glass bowl. They don't make that pong sound, but more it's like a dense something heavy hitting something else heavy. And so oh, the onions are really floppy. That's great. And I'm going to test one of the sweet potatoes. Oh yeah, the knife just slid right in. I might have misled you a little bit earlier. You don't want the knife to slip right out as quickly as I might have indicated, because you want them to be tender enough so that the rest of the cooking, the searing that'll happen in the wok, won't render them overdone. So this is just par cooking at this point. But if the knife doesn't go in easily, then you still have to microwave a little more. So I would say this is 2 to 4 minutes in the microwave, depending on the type of microwave that you have, what your power is like in your microwave. The other thing that happens when things are cooked is they lose moisture and they collapse, and so the volume decreases. So these are ready. We've got just a little bit of time left here. Let me look in and give these a stir.
Linda, there's another quick question.
I would be turning on the exhaust fan. Just a sec, we're going to have time for a question in just a moment. Okay, you can see that the Brussels sprouts have turned really vibrant green, and that's a good sign that they're starting to soften. And now, let me add, by the way, this is just a very inexpensive wok lid that I got in Chinatown a long time ago, Chinatown in San Francisco. All right, so I've added the sweet potatoes and the onions, and I'm going to leave the lid off now and just stir these around until they're done. So this will be a good time for questions.
Yeah, so a couple people were wondering, is there a substitution for the wok if they don't have a wok?
Yes, you could use a stir fry pan or any pan that's flat on the bottom. You don't really, I like the wok because it's easy to push these around with the back side of the spatula. This would be the front side, so I'm using the back side. And the curve of the spatula works really well with the curve of the wok. But yeah, you just use a skillet.
And another question.
Skillet. This is a really seasoned wok. This one happens to be cast iron, so it holds the heat really well. Go ahead.
And the other question was, is there a wok that you do recommend if somebody wanted to go buy one?
Wow. I haven't bought a wok in a long time. I'll tell you, for several years, I did recipe testing and editing for the Weber Grill Company. Our back deck looks like a freaking Weber showroom. And they sent me all sorts of appliances to go with their newest grills. And the wok was one of them. And so I haven't bought a wok in, I think when I was in cooking school, or maybe even before I bought a wok. So that's 1983. What I would do is, I mean, if things were different right now, I would go to Chinatown and Oakland or Berkeley, or Oakland or San Francisco, and go in San Francisco on Grant Street, there's that great wok shop. It's like a hardware store for cooking. And I would just ask them their advice. But you could go to a place like Sur La Table or Williams-Sonoma and do the same thing if that were easier for whatever reason. I'm going to taste this now, and I'll get back to the wok question. if you use a wooden spoon or fork or knife when you're tasting, you run less of a risk of burning your lip with hot food. So what I'm going to go for is a piece of the Brussels sprout, and I'm going to go for one of the bigger pieces just because, well, not because I'm hungry, but just because I want to see if that's done. Again, if the big piece is done, then the smaller pieces are done. If I tasted a smaller piece and that were done, I wouldn't know if the bigger pieces were done. They're crisp, tender, which is really nice, but they're not raw tasting. And they're still nice and green. So I know the other ingredients are done. I've also tasted for seasoning, and while I was taking that taste, and what I noticed, I'm turning the heat off now. What I noticed is that the seasoning balance is great. The crushed red pepper flakes are not prominent. They just add a layer of complexity and depth to this final taste. So I'm going to spread these out in the wok and then push this aside. Let me push this away. Okay. I'm going to push this aside and bring forth the pot for poaching the eggs. Cover it to keep the heat in. And as far as buying a wok, the other thing that these days I've been doing a lot of is going to Amazon. I don't necessarily buy the thing on Amazon, but getting the reader reviews of whatever it is I'm thinking about. I mean, I just bought bathing caps. I've been swimming at the Albany pool lately, or water exercise at the Albany pool. And the bathing caps, my goodness, it really helped me to know which one not to buy. Although the one I ended up buying wasn't great anyway. But you can get a lot of information from those reader comments. All right, I'm going to move the wok to the side. And this is a Dutch oven. This one happens to be all clad. And the reason that I love this pan is because it has this concave lid. And you'll notice when you cook anything, the food, when it releases moisture, forms condensation on the underside of the lid. And I've never seen a recipe that calls for 2 tablespoons of condensation from the lid. So what you want to do, especially when you're braising, is you can capture it if it's concave. If it's a flat lid, it'll slide right off and go right into your beautifully reduced sauce or whatever. So I just take it over to the sink and dump it out. And that makes it very easy. Okay, so we're switching to the poached eggs recipe. I've got the Dutch oven. I believe this is a 4-quart Dutch oven. And now I'm going to add 6 cups of water. This is just water from the filter spigot in the kitchen here. And then I'm going to turn this on high and bring it to a boil. This recipe is really fascinating to me. For several years, when I was first in cooking school, I got really confident finally about poaching eggs. We had they never let the freshmen do this, but once you became a sophomore, you participated in what we called Eggs on Parade. Every Friday, we cooked every egg dish you can imagine, from quiche to scrambled eggs to those custardy French scrambled eggs made over a double boiler with as much cream as egg. What else did we make? We made poached eggs. We made sunny side up eggs. We made over easy eggs. And then the whole school, the chefs and the staff and the faculty and all the other students would come in at 11 o'clock and we would have this buffet of egg dishes. And we hated it because it was repetitious, but each student, theoretically, each student would rotate among the egg stations and you'd make each one of these things. And so I needed to get a part-time job. And one of my friends was working at Cafe Lido in North Beach, and they needed a brunch cook for Saturdays and Sundays. So, I talked to my chef and I said, what do you think? Do I have the chops to be able to apply for this job? And I went in and aced the interview and got the job. And fortunately, my friend was there to sort of guide me along. Poaching eggs in a restaurant was really, really challenging. And it's amazing that they ever came out well. Because what we would do is we would have this big stainless steel insert. We called it an insert. It's the stainless steel rectangular vessel that you would see placed in a cafeteria steam table. So we'd take one of those and put it on the back burner or burners, depending on how much egg poaching we were going to do, and fill it up with water, and then glug in some white vinegar. Never measured it. Then sprinkle in a bunch of salt. Never measured it. And then someone would order poached eggs, and we would take the egg. I'm going to get my eggs. We would take the egg and crack it on the edge of that stainless steel vessel, which I'll tell you about in a minute why that's a no-no. And then, just go right down in on this. Sometimes the water would be simmering. Sometimes it would be boiling so fast you'd have to turn it down and get it back to a simmer and break the egg in there. And the wispy whites would go all over the place. And you'd try to corral them with the spoon, making the swirling motion. And, there was really no science behind it. It was just, this is how you poach. This is what a poached egg should be like in the end. And here, good luck to you. So then I got a job at the Sausalito Inn. After I graduated from school, I was doing a few different jobs, but I was working there on Sundays as the only weekend brunch cook. And again, the thing with the poached eggs. And I just thought, my mother used to make eggs on toast, soft-boiled egg on a piece of toast for us before we went off to school. And I loved the texture of the soft-boiled egg. So I tried to, replicate that experience with poached eggs, but I was constantly disappointed. They were never consistent. They weren't the same every time I made them. So once I thought I mastered poached eggs, I figured, okay, I got this down and I know what I'm doing. And then, but I'd still have mishaps. Maybe the yolk would break, et cetera, et cetera. So what happened is I've been a charter subscriber to Cooks Illustrated magazine, and, then taken over by, or the America's Test Kitchen crew came in, and they've been doing a lot of research on all sorts of stuff. And one of them is eggs. So I've learned how to poach eggs this new way. And it drives me nuts that they use the word perfect, because I don't know that, anything is ever perfect, but I call them foolproof. And I'm going to show you this technique that will pretty much guarantee that you are going to have success poaching eggs. And you won't have that wispy white, and you won't have to make that cyclone motion with your spoon. And it's all about technique. So just like any recipe that's simple in terms of the number of ingredients, technique plays a really key role. And so with technique comes equipment, the right equipment, and timing and attention. So you want to have everything measured out and ready to go here. So I've got our 6 cups of water coming to a boil. As soon as that boils, I'm going to turn the heat down to the lowest setting. I'm not going to turn the heat off, just down. Okay, I have here, I put an extra one in case one breaks. It's never happened, but maybe it's because I always have a backup. I don't know. So these are pastured eggs, and I'm going to tell you about pastured eggs in a moment. The other thing that, the equipment that I have here that's of critical importance is this little colander. Now, this is a colander that has perforations all over the surface. And normally I would make this recipe, I would do this technique in the sink, and you'll see why. But because I want you to see what happens to the eggs, I'm using a glass bowl to receive them. So I'm going to try to do this in a place on the board where you can see. Okay. Now I have a piece of paper towel here, and I'm going to break the eggs one by one into the colander, and I'm going to tip them around in the colander for 20 to 30 seconds to release the watery, feathery whites. So not the whole white, but just the liquidy part of the white that is present in every egg. So here's the first one. You always want to break your egg on a flat surface. And the reason you do that is to avoid any, or prevent any of the sharp shell that might result from cracking it on a sharp edge from getting into the eggs. So I usually just have to do that twice, turn it over and take my thumbs and break the egg into the colander. And I've been doing this enough so that I don't have to look at the clock, but it's good to have a clock with a second hand around the first time you do this. So this one isn't releasing. Here it goes. It starts to come off. The older the eggs, the more watery white there will be. It doesn't mean they're not fit to eat. Okay, the water's boiling. How can I tell? Steam is coming up and I can hear it. So I'm going to turn this all the way to the lowest setting and ignore it. Okay, so this is not producing too much watery white. And I just move it around the colander. And of course, the first time you do this, you think, oh, this is never going to work. This is going to break the yolk. But it's amazing how resilient these are. And now I have a 2-cup liquid measure. And I'm going to tip, believe it or not, it's not going to break. I'm going to tip this by putting the edge of the colander onto the edge of the glass. I'm just going to tip it in. So there's my first egg. I told you we were doing 4. Here's number 2. Now, pastured eggs are preferred for nutritional value, at least, because the eggs that are in a cage, even if it says cage free, that means there's a door in the hen house and they can go out if they want to. But by nature, those of you who raise chickens know this, by nature, they want to stick to each other. They want to be friends with each other. They don't want to go roaming around on their own. Pastured eggs are eggs are produced from hens that are allowed to go into a pasture. They're taken to a pasture. And you might, if you read Michael Pollan's first book, The Omnivore's Dilemma, you might remember the farm in Pennsylvania where the farmer would take this hen house on wheels and move it. I don't know if it was every week or every day, to a different part of his pasture. And the hens would eat, all the stuff that they're meant to eat, the bugs and the grass. And in the process, they would fertilize the soil on the farm, which was really great for grazing the sheep. I mean, it was really, really a sustainable, in the true sense of the word, a sustainable situation. So this one has pretty much stopped releasing any feathery white. And we're going to tip this one in, 2. Okay, now we'll do 3. So pastured eggs have a higher nutrient profile, and yes, they are more expensive. And when you think about what you're getting in an egg, think about an egg is about an ounce. Think about an ounce of potato chips. The difference in nutritional profile and how it will sustain you throughout the morning the difference is quite significant. So you're supporting a farmer who's got this really cool practice of pasturing her or his hens, and you're getting the nutritional benefits of eating these. Now, if your budget doesn't allow for this, look for omega-3 eggs. One of my doctors just told me that, she said, if you can't use pastured eggs, definitely go for the omega-3 added eggs because they're going to contribute a similar nutritional profile. Okay, so this one, again, these aren't releasing much much watery white, but we're getting, I would say, almost a tablespoon per egg. So here's number 3. And these are fresh from the Berkeley Bowl. These are the Berkeley Bowl brand pastured eggs. So it could just be that they're super fresh.
Linda.
Yes.
Louise asked, can you do 2 eggs at once?
Is that a challenge? Can I do 2 eggs at once? That's a really good question. I have never done that. I don't think I would, Lee, because each egg, as you can see, is releasing a different amount of that white. And so I don't know. It just feels like it would be taking a risk with them bouncing around in the colander together. But I would love for you to try it, Lee, and then send me an email. My email address and my website are at the bottom of the recipes. By the way, I tried to format those recipes so that they were each on one page So you would have a nice nifty 4-page handout. And I'm sorry, because I saw them when they came in this morning and it comes out to 7 pages. I'm really sorry about that. I'm going to talk to the folks in the office to figure out how I can format my next recipes so that doesn't happen. So you're only, you don't print out all that paper or use all that paper. Okay. So here we go with number 4. And now, what do we have here? We have about, I would say we have 1/4 cup of egg white. And I saved this because the other day when I made some, I captured the whites like this. Normally, as I said, they just go down in the sink, go down the drain. But I added this to, I made nudi, Gnudi, nudi. It's spinach and ricotta dumplings. It's like ravioli without the pasta around it. So they're nude, if you can, picture that play on words. And it called for a couple of egg whites. So I used this and it worked really well. But you could also save this. I had been saving it to put in scrambled eggs the next morning or French toast batter. There's nothing wrong with it, but it's just not something we want to add to the poached eggs. Were there any other questions? Okay, cool. I'm going to move along. I have the pot of 6 cups of water that's come to a boil. And now I'm going to add a teaspoon of salt, fine sea salt, and that'll make the water boil up. And then I've got a tablespoon of white vinegar, just plain white vinegar, distilled white vinegar. And I'll stir that around a little bit. And I'm going to set up the towel here. So this technique is all America's Test Kitchen. I reworded it because I find that sometimes their wording gets me in trouble. Okay, so I'll tell you more about that in a minute. I've got the water that's seasoned now with the salt and the vinegar. And I know in the recipe it says take this off the heat, but I've learned that you don't have to do that. Okay, so now what we're going to do is gingerly tip 1 egg at a time into the pot. And I'm going to try to do it because I'm a righty. I'm going to go counterclockwise. I'm going to try to start at 12 o'clock, then go to 3, and then go to 9 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 3 o'clock. So watch what happens here. And it's really interesting how they do remain individual. They in the pot, they're going to start to make friends with their neighbor. But I'm now going to quickly put the lid on. This is empty, and I'm going to set the timer for 3 minutes. And I find 3 minutes is just right. It gives you a runny yolk, but the white is firm. And I'm one of those people who cannot abide a runny white. If you like it less done, then I would try 2.5 minutes. It's really quite interesting how perfectly uniform these do come out. Maybe that's where they get the word perfect at America's Test Kitchen. So the one of the things about America's Test Kitchen's recipe that I was disappointed in is this piece about the towel. No matter what restaurant I worked in, we always had, whoever was at the poaching station always had a stack of clean kitchen towels right by the poaching pan. Because to me, there's nothing worse. Even like today, if I go out, I remember, Homemade Cafe, I used to get poached eggs there. And they did a good job of not having there be water in the little monkey dish the eggs are served in. But some restaurants, I'm not going to name them, are less careful about that. Maybe they don't use a slotted spoon to remove the egg from the water. Maybe they just don't drain it like this. But I don't like to see a pool of water in the bottom of the eggs, the poached eggs. So this is how to prevent it. For 4 eggs, I'm going to use 2 spoons here. And I've got this terry cloth towel, a clean kitchen towel. You can use any material that's going to be absorbent. And Diane, I'm going to have you push this back. I'm going to take this too. And I'm now going to bring you some of the makings of this breakfast plate that I'm going to assemble for you. Looks like we have under a minute left here. I have some toast. Now, in your stack of recipes, you have the bonus recipe, which is for the whole grain soda bread. I've got it right here. And I'm not going to demo how to make this bread because, you know, you want to get off the call before the 10 o'clock news comes on. Seriously, this is a pretty fast bread to put together. And the best thing about it is that it takes an hour to bake. It takes about 25 minutes to assemble. And 15 of those 25 minutes are just letting the ingredients sit for 15 minutes before you put them, transfer the batter into the loaf pan. It's what I like about it. I'll show you a piece right here. Is I have walnuts in here and sesame seed, not sesame seeds, sunflower seeds. You could put sesames. Rolled oats, cornmeal. I've been buying Full Belly Farms coarsely ground fresh red cornmeal. I've been getting that at, well, the one market I have gone to is Rockies at the Brooklyn Basin, the new Rockies market. Oh, it's fabulous. Okay, there's the timer. I don't want to delay. And I have, oops, I turned it on low and I forgot to turn it off. Let's see if that's a bad thing. Okay, no, it seems like it's okay. So I want to take out first the egg that I put in first. And you just go in there and you scoop it from the bottom very carefully. Try to let any excess water come off there. And then I'm going to take some of the hash and add it to, let's see, add it to the plate I have here. The sweet potatoes give a really nice color to this. And now I'll add 2 of these eggs to this hash. And then I'll take out the other 2. I mean, if I had 4 spoons, I would certainly use 4, but these are going to be just fine like this. Now, you can poach these a day ahead. And in school, in fact, we used to do that because they wanted to give us a lot of practice with the old-fashioned method that I don't like because they knew we would break eggs. We broke eggs all the time making poached eggs then. So what you do is you let them cool off and then you can put them in a glass container with a lid in the fridge. And then when you reheat them in steaming water like this, not boiling water, not simmering water, but steaming water. And what I do is I stick a little paring knife in the white and touch it to my lip. I don't do that if a child is around because I don't want them to think I'm doing something with a knife in my mouth. Or, you know, like you were testing a baby's bottle, you could test the temperature on your wrist. So you just reheat them in steaming water. And a lot of hotels do that for their big, if they're doing a banquet with poached eggs or something like that. Okay, so let's look at these eggs here. I want to cut into them to see if I've got, ooh, that's a nice runny yolk. And I wouldn't do this before I was serving it. I'm just doing this for you so you can see. So the white is really firm. The yolk is nice and runny. And I've got a piece of toast here. And let's garnish this with a little bit of orange. There we go. And there is our hash with poached eggs, toast, and a little orange garnish. And now I'm going to put a little chili oil on here. This is one that you have to scoop up the solids from the jar. And I think this is a really nice flavor with these eggs. But of course, you know, you could just do a sprinkle of freshly ground pepper and salt to garnish these. You know, the class is called A Healthy Beginning to the New Year, and healthy and delicious. Well, I hope you trust me on the delicious part, but let's just look at this again to look at what makes this healthy. Well, you've got the obvious protein from the eggs that you know is really, I'm finding that I used to eat 2, now I eat 1 egg. And that really holds me for a good long while in the morning. One of the things to keep in mind about eating an anti-inflammatory diet, which I know a lot of us are working toward these days. Anti-inflammation, efforts will help towards rheumatoid arthritis, diabetes, glucose management, and other muscle and body aches. So it's sort of a buzzword these days, anti-inflammation. So one of the things that I try to keep in mind that I've learned about in my reading about anti-inflammatory diets, Diane, can you pan up? And I'll bring this forward, or I'll bring, yeah, is that you want to try to eat the rainbow or cook the rainbow. So here we've got green Brussels sprouts, we've got brown mushrooms. Mushrooms are loaded with nutrients, by the way. I used to think they were, sort of a nutrient desert, but no, they are loaded with nutrients, especially oyster mushrooms, which you can use here. And then you've got that orange sweet potato. That's terrific. I mean, the same lycopene that's in tomatoes is coloring this orange sweet potato. And the onions, oh my goodness, alliums, garlic, leeks, onions, shallots are nutritional powerhouses. Add them to anything that makes sense and they will serve you well. And they add a great flavor. Now, if I were using these onions in a foundation flavor element of a dish, like if I were making chili, I would chop them. But because I want them to be part of the hash in a discriminate ingredient that I can see and pick up and taste, I cut these lyonnaise style. But certainly, this is a hash that you can add anything to. These are just some ratios, the 2 tablespoons of oil to the 8 ounces of mushrooms, to the 8 ounces of Brussels sprouts. And yes, by all means, you can cut it in half. So this is what I had to make for you today. And you may have some questions about this, or you may have some questions about the bread. I make the bread. I'll tell you, I used to have Esther's, I think it's called Steiner brat. Oh, we lost our image. There it is, we're back. I used to have Esther's Steiner brat toast. It was full of walnuts and grains and seeds, and I loved it. And when the COVID lockdown started, it seems like the recipe might have changed. Maybe somebody knows about that. And I became dissatisfied with it. And so I said, well, there's no reason I can't make my own whole grain bread. But I didn't want to spend a lot of time with yeast and rising, because whole wheat flour usually requires a couple of rises. And then I seized on this soda bread recipe that I had made a long time ago and thought, well, why can't I make it as a soda bread? So the thing about the buttermilk, because this is what holds, in the past when I've taught this class, people have said, oh, I'm going to make that as soon as I buy some buttermilk. Well, the nice thing about buttermilk is you can buy it's hard to find in less than a quart. So I buy a quart and then I freeze the rest. I freeze it in 1 cup increments. So if I'm going to make potato or pancakes, then I want to make sure that I know I need a cup of buttermilk in my pancakes recipe. So I freeze it in a glass jar. You want to make sure you leave some headroom, about 3/4 of an inch, because it will expand as it freezes. And it's the same, it's not like you're going to be drinking it and the texture would be different and not pleasant. But when you're using it as an ingredient in a bread or in pancake batter, it doesn't seem to matter that much. So I hope you'll give it a try. You can use any size loaf pan that holds the same volume. I happen to make mine, as you can see, it's a smaller piece. That's because I make it in a long pan that's narrower, because this is about the size of toast that I want every morning, and I want to have edges on all sides. So rather than having a half piece, I have this. And then the other big secret with this bread, with any bread you bake, is if you take a little bit of melted butter, and in this case, we're talking about 2 teaspoons, I put it in a glass measure and I microwave it for not even 30 seconds to melt the butter. And then I take a brush and I brush that melted butter on the top crust shortly after it comes out of the oven. And that softens the top crust, so that when you cut it, it doesn't crumble. This crust, because it's baked for an hour, it tends to get dark. And the darker it gets, the harder it gets. And then when you slice it, it tends to crumble. So the way to prevent that is to make it nice and soft on the top And the way to make it soft is to brush it with melted butter, and it'll soak in. You know, it's not like it's a slick surface or anything. And a lot of people do that with cornbread anyway. So it's a technique borrowed from that. Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, so we have a couple questions in
Good.
the chat from Francis. Can you poach eggs with a more firm yolk?
Yes, absolutely. You can poach. I would go for 3.5 minutes, and I would do some for 3.5 minutes and some for 4 minutes, just, you know, under the guise of scientific experimentation, and see which one you prefer. I inadvertently forgot to set the timer once when I was making these, and I ended up with very firm yolks. They're still delicious. It's like eating a hard cooked egg, but it's still more tender, I think. It's not as rubbery. So I think I had them in there for 4 minutes. And depending on how firm you like the yolk, I would say 3.5 or 4 minutes. Try both. Try some, you know, 2 one way and 2 the other way.
All right, for Mary, we have, are you using room temperature eggs or cold from the fridge eggs? I assume that would affect cooking time.
Yeah, good question. I used today cold from the fridge eggs. And it's funny, a friend of mine who raises chickens gave me some eggs earlier on Sunday. And I was planning to use them this morning, but as I was rinsing them off because I didn't know how clean they were. And I noticed that they were pretty small. So I decided, well, better go with the safe bet and use the Berkeley Bowl eggs that I have in the fridge. I think that by the time they sat out a little bit and I was rolling them around in the colander, that they weren't exactly cold, but yeah, this, I would say, to be fair, this recipe has been tested with eggs that are fresh from the fridge.
Okay, from Deborah, we have you ever served the hash as a side dish for dinner?
Oh, bless you, Deborah. I forgot to tell you about the origin of this hash. Here's how it started. I had to read, because I was interviewing him, I had to read Jacques Pepin's Fast Food My Way, which was his latest book. He was coming to Copia on a book tour. I had to introduce him and interview him. And of course, I had to read the whole book. So the one recipe I seized on that I knew I had to make was Brussels sprouts fricassee. And this book came out right around the time that Rachel Ray was doing her 30-minute meals, and that was all the rage, you know, like sheet pan meals are all the rage right now. So the recipe couldn't be simpler. It's basically 3 strips of bacon cut into lardons, put in the pan, 1 tablespoon of oil added to the bacon, turn on the heat, cook the bacon, add the Brussels sprouts. Oh, sorry, 4 ingredients: salt. Add salt, cook, stir fry, cook till the Brussels sprouts are done to your liking. That Brussels sprouts fricassee became a staple in our house. It's the way we would prefer to eat Brussels sprouts. And it became a staple on our Thanksgiving table because it's a quick and easy and delicious way to add a green vegetable to a brown meal. And it was really, really because I had leftover fricassee one day. It was a Sunday morning and I was thinking, well, I want to make something for breakfast, you know, besides having a bowl of cereal or something. It's a special occasion. Let's have something special for breakfast. But I had the leftover hash and I had a sweet potato and I thought, oh, let me try this. So I just played around. I mean, I knew this technique of softening onions in the microwave, which I do before I grill cross sections of onions. This is a way to get really tender onions that, you know, don't burn before they're done in the middle. So I tried the sweet potatoes with the onions and added some garlic powder because I knew that would add some flavor. And then I combined those. And that's how this recipe was born. Yeah, you can make the Brussels sprouts with just the bacon or just the mushrooms and enjoy that as a side dish. And then the next morning, you've got the basis for your hash. Thanks for asking.
All right, Hugh asked, what did you add at the end when serving?
At the end, when serving, I added a piece of toast and I added 2 halves of, these are navel oranges, and some chili oil. That is which probably what you see, the orange chili oil.
All right. And Susan asks, what about powdered buttermilk in the bread?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I keep forgetting to buy it. I used to buy it through King Arthur Flour and have it in my pantry as a staple. And I just keep forgetting to buy it. But yes, powdered buttermilk works. Just use their recipe for rehydrating it. I don't remember what the ratio is, but make sure that you whisk that well so you don't get lumps of the powder. And the other thing you can do is, you can add a tablespoon of lemon juice to a 1 cup liquid measure, and then add milk to the 1 cup mark, and let that sit to curdle for about 5 minutes. It'll look gross, but stir it up, and then you've got the equivalent of buttermilk. So you've basically created acidulated milk, which has the same properties in the recipe as the buttermilk if you were to open a carton of buttermilk. Anybody else?
Peggy just wants to make sure that she thanks you and says excellent class. And then Ronnie asks, is any change in technique or timing if using an electric stove rather than gas?
Oh, first of all, thank you, Peggy. It's my pleasure. This is the thing I love to do the most. So thank you for giving me the opportunity. And an electric stove. When we first moved here, we bought this house because it had a terrible kitchen. And I knew I wanted to remodel the kitchen before I started teaching classes here. And it had an electric stove. So for a year, I cooked on that stove. And the way I did it is, if I were making soup, I would turn on 3 burners. One was on the lowest setting, one was on a medium setting, and one was on the highest setting. And I'd move the pan around the 3 burners because I didn't want to wait. Cooks are notorious for being impatient. I didn't want to wait for the burner I was working on to come up to temperature. So yes, you could certainly do it on an electric stove. And in that case, I would definitely remove the pot from the heat source before you add the eggs. So you can add the vinegar and the salt either on that burner or off. It doesn't matter. But because there's much more residual heat, as you know, in those coils from an electric stove. It takes a longer time to cool down. Induction would be probably about the same as gas in terms of timing. I know it seems hard to believe this, but it's hard to screw up this recipe. If you get the measurements right, the techniques right, with the moving those eggs around in the colander, and you can use a sieve. The other day I used a sieve with a mesh that was about the same mesh as a window screen, and it just took longer, and I felt like I had to shake it a little bit, and I didn't want to risk breaking the yolk in the process. So it did work. I'm not saying you have to go out and buy a colander to make this, but if you have a sieve, make sure it's the widest mesh of your sieves. And if you're going to buy a colander, you buy one that has perforations across the surface, all around the surface, because some of them are just on the bottom and then on the side, and then there's a sort of Bermuda triangle right around the perimeter of the bottom where there are no perforations. And that's exactly where the liquid sits. So you are moving it around, and you can engineer it so that the egg is coming in contact with the holes.
All right.
Yeah.
Kathy asked, can you substitute another vegetable for Brussels sprouts?
Oh, Kathy, can you substitute another recipe for vegetable for Brussels sprouts? Why do beets come to mind right away? Let's see. Kyoga beets, the ones that are not, or yellow beets. Red beets are such a mess, and you have to wear gloves, otherwise your hands get stained, which some people consider that a badge of honor. I think if I were going to do beets, I would par cook them the way I did the sweet potatoes. And they would be pretty and delicious and good. I mean, carrots could also work, although I'm not feeling the love for carrots with breakfast for some reason. You could use leeks and double the allium. So I would still use the onions that are in the sweet potatoes, but use nice cross sections of leek. And I don't know why everybody cuts the green part off of the leek. Leek greens are wonderful to eat, and you just have to cook them longer. So I would probably, I wouldn't hesitate to use leeks. I would just cut them into pieces that maybe the greens would be a little narrower than the whites so that they would cook in about the same time. And maybe you have a vegetable you're thinking of that you want to ask me about. Don't hesitate to chime back in here, because I'm going, you could use red bell peppers. You could use a rainbow of bell peppers. That would be delicious. I'm thinking that you want the pieces to be about the size as the Brussels sprouts. And that's just if you want to have the same timing.
Broccoli, squash.
Broccoli, squash. Oh, absolutely. Zucchini. Thank you. Cauliflower. I'm just not feeling the love for cauliflower at breakfast either, but you may. Butternut squash. Yeah, you could do that. It's the same color. Delicata. That's the squash I would use, because you can use the skin. You can eat the skin of delicata squash. And yellow summer squash. I wouldn't, I don't make this in the summertime, or I haven't yet. So it's going to be interesting. By the way, I'm going to be teaching a series for Ollie in June on Monday mornings. So it's going to be all about summer produce. Maybe I'll make this in one of the classes using summer vegetables. I wouldn't use tomatoes, but tomatoes and eggs are really good together. So I may maybe I'll use tomatoes as a garnish or something like that. And, toss some tomatoes with basil and olive oil, and not garnish, but, side accompaniment to get some, the orange is, the acid in the orange is going to make you salivate. And when you salivate, just like with wine, acid in wine makes you salivate, which makes you want more. So that's one of the reasons that oranges in restaurants often accompany egg dishes, because they add acid, so they balance out the richness of the other things on the plate, and they're really easy to prep. Anything else?
So the last two comments are admiration. So you're a wonderful teacher, Linda. Thank you for inspiring me. That is from, wait a minute. That is from Claire. MW, many thanks. I love all the details you include in the instruction. And then lastly, okay, Mary says, thanks, Linda, great class. I learned several new techniques, and as a registered dietitian, nutritionist, I can attest to the health and nutritional value of the dish. I would highly recommend it. Great
Thank
class.
you.
Love your book
Thank
too,
you.
Susan Adler.
Great.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you. And Rob and Leigh Charles, you have made this work so seamlessly. Thank you to the great tech crew at Ollie. I mean, I admired you all from my first Joe Lurie class through to my next class. And Susan, I appreciate your inviting me to do this and your warm welcome and introduction. And I'm really looking forward to doing this again for you in June. Thanks.
Thank you. We're thrilled.
Good.
This was a wonderful reprieve from all the news of the day. And so we're all going to be returning to our kitchen for that hopeful zest.
Excellent.
And
Well, if anybody does decide to make one or both of these, or the bread too, and you want to send me a photo, my email address is on the recipes, or at least my website is. I think my email address is. And I'd love to hear how it works for you. Thanks very, very much.
Great idea, Linda. And when they send it to you, CC it to Ollie at Berkeley.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
some blog posts on the cooking
What a
class.
great idea. All
Yeah.
right.
Okay, everybody, have a great day. And
You
Linda,
too.
thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Bye-bye now.
Bye.